Ada by Gertrude Stein. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Ada by Gertrude Stein. Barnes Collard did not say he would not do it, but he did not do it. He did it, and then he did not do it. He did not ever think about it. He just thought sometime he might do something. His father, Mr. Abram Collard, spoke about it to everyone, and very many of them spoke to Barnes Collard about it, and he always listened to them. Then Barnes fell in love with a very nice girl, and she would not marry him. He cried then. His father, Mr. Abram Collard, comforted him, and they took a trip, and Barnes promised he would do what his father wanted him to be doing. He did not do the thing. He thought he would do another thing. He did not do the other thing. His father, Mr. Collard, did not want him to do the other thing. He really did not do anything then. When he was a good deal older, he married a very rich girl. He had thought perhaps he would not propose to her, but his sister wrote to him that it would be a good thing. He married the rich girl, and she thought he was the most wonderful man and one who knew everything. Barnes never spent more than the income of the fortune he and his wife had then. That is to say, they did not spend more than the income. And this was a surprise to very many who knew about him and about his marrying the girl who had such a large fortune. He had a happy life while he was living, and after he was dead his wife and children remembered him. He had a sister who also was successful enough in being one being living. His sister was one who came to be happier than most people come to be in living. She came to be a completely happy one. She was twice as old as her brother. She had been a very good daughter to her mother. She and her mother had always told very pretty stories to each other. Many old men loved to hear her tell these stories to her mother. Everyone who ever knew her mother liked her mother. Many were sorry later that not everyone liked the daughter. Many did like the daughter, but not everyone, as everyone had liked the mother. The daughter was charming inside, in her. It did not show outside in her to everyone. It certainly did to some. She did sometimes think her mother would be pleased with a story that did not please her mother. When her mother later was sicker, the daughter knew that there were some stories she could tell her that would not please her mother. Her mother died, and really mostly altogether the mother and the daughter had told each other stories very happily together. The daughter then kept house for her father and took care of her brother. There were many relations who lived with them. The daughter did not like them to live with them, and she did not like them to die with them. The daughter, Ada, they had called her after her grandmother, who had delightful ways of smelling flowers and eating dates and sugar, did not like it at all then, as she did not like so much dying, and she did not like any of the living she was doing then. Every now and then some old gentleman told delightful stories to her. Mostly then there were not nice stories told by anyone then in her living. She told her father, Mr. Abram Collard, that she did not like it at all being one being living then. He never said anything. She was afraid then. She was one needing charming stories and happy telling of them, and not having that thing she was always trembling. Then Everyone who could live with them were dead, and there were then the father and the son, a young man then, and the daughter coming to be that one then. Her grandfather had left some money to them, each one of them. Ada said she was going to use it to go away from them. The father said nothing then he said something, and she said nothing then they both said nothing, and then it was that she went away from them. The father was quite tender then, she was his daughter then. He wrote her tender letters then, she wrote him tender letters then. She never went back to live with him. He wanted her to come, and she wrote him tender letters then. He liked the tender letters she wrote to him. He wanted her to live with him. She answered him by writing tender letters to him, and telling very nice stories indeed in them. He wrote nothing, and then he wrote again, and there was some waiting, and then he wrote tender letters again and again. She came to be happier than anybody else who was living then. It is easy to believe this thing. She was telling someone who was loving every story that was charming. Someone who was living was almost always listening. Someone who was loving was almost always listening. That one who was loving was almost always listening. That one who was loving was telling about being one, then listening. That one being loving was then telling stories having a beginning and a middle and an ending. That one was then one always completely listening. Ada was then one, and all her living, then one completely telling stories that were charming, completely listening to stories having a beginning and a middle and an ending. Trembling was all living, living was all loving. Someone was then the other one. Certainly this one was loving this Ada then. And certainly Ada, all her living then, was happier in living than anyone else who ever could, who was, who is, who ever will be living. End of Ada by Gertrude Stein.